I want to move on here because we have a gentleman waiting in the wings. A couple of weeks ago, BJ, one of our listeners and also one of our writers on the website, Nancy, she called in and was talking about the Extortion 17 situation there. Now, we had this alleged raid on the alleged Osama bin Laden compound, as it's called, in Pakistan. There were some different people. I was watching a video, in fact, where there was a journalist on the ground, and one of the neighbors who lived in that area came in and said some things about how there was only one helicopter that landed there. That helicopter blew up. I don't know if he was telling the truth or not. She seemed to be skeptical at first until she talked to some other neighbors, and they had some other stories that seemed to corroborate what this guy was saying. The bottom line is, as bin Laden was reported dead back in 2001, there's been a lot of questions raised about that whole thing. What was it all about? And then, very importantly, germane to that subject is the fact that the Navy SEAL Team 6, which was involved in that whole thing, started to be killed off. And we've talked about this, at some length in past broadcasts. We're going to bring up a gentleman who's a father of one of those Navy SEAL Team 6 people that were killed. His Chinook helicopter was shot down in Afghanistan, and he's been trying, along with the other families that were involved there, to get answers out of this government, and they've been being stonewalled every step of the way. Charles Strange is joining us. Charles, thank you so much for being with us here on Government America.
Thank you, Darren. Hello, everybody. My name's Charles Strange. I'm the Gold Star father of Michael Strange. Michael was CTR-1. He died with 29 brave other Americans on August 6, 2011 in a helicopter called Extortion 17. It was the biggest loss of life in the Iraq and Afghan war, and it was the biggest loss of life ever in the history of any war. 22 guys from the Dev Group, Special Operations. And,
so there. You say there were 30 altogether, counting your son aboard the helicopter?
Yes, and 8 Afghans. So there was 38, okay. And the dog part.
Okay.
Warrior dog.
So let's back up here for just a moment. Prior to that, and that event took place on August 6th, right, of 2011, when the shooting happened.
Yes.
Your son had come home from service on a break, and at the end of one of his tours, I guess, and he began talking to you, and that seemed to give you some indication that there was some warning signs that he had that something really bad was coming. Can you elaborate a little bit about those conversations and share with our listeners some of what he was talking about there, some of the hints that he might have had?
Sure. Michael called me in April 15th, 2011, said, Dad, everything's going to be down for a couple of weeks, no email, no phone, da-da-da-da-da. Then I don't know what happened. And then May was whatever happened in Pakistan, and he came home in June. And Michael was in the military 8 years, and like I said earlier, with the most elite fighting team in the world for 4. And for the first time, he grabs me by the bicep, and he says, Dad, I got a will. I said, what are you talking about? He said, Dad, I'm not messing around. And he says, ... And that weekend, he grabs me 3 times by the bicep. And not many things. Michael never talked about what was going on, or he kept it close to the vest, like you're supposed to.
Right.
And that was June 6th, which was his birthday. He was home on leave, all of them, and he stops at my sister's house, Aunt Maggie, tells her about it, Will, and he leaves Philadelphia 4 days early. He never left home 4 days early. And next thing, August 6th, the military's at the door and telling me my son gets killed. And a Chinook helicopter.
There were other friends that he had that was also in the same unit, right? And there were also indications that they too also knew something was amiss.
Oh yeah, all 22 of them knew somebody was leaking something to somebody. One guy called his family, Aaron Vaughn, down in Florida. He called, told his mom to wipe the social media out. Da 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 da. Another guy had his whole family come down to where they live, and they used to have a secret spot where all the elite guys live from this base, 20 minutes out, and he even brought his grandmom down. One guy used to say, "Yo, Dad, don't drink all the beer. I'll be home in 3 months." This time he puts his hands on his shoulders, thanks him for the way he raises them. And they all knew something was going on.
Yeah. Okay, hold it right there, Charles. We have to take a quick time out here, and we have a little bit more time in the next segment, okay? Stay with us, folks. We're going to get more into this story of betrayal here on the other side of the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Government America, visiting with Charles Strange. Nancy Levant is here, and I'm Darren Weeks. Charles is the father of Michael Strange, who was one of the Navy SEAL Team 6 members who was shot down in Afghanistan after the so-called bin Laden raid. We're hearing his story today, and it's a story, ladies and gentlemen, a horrible story of tremendous betrayal. And that's the only thing I can say. Huge slap in the face to our military and to those that serve, to think that they can be put into harm's way. You know, obviously, if you're in a war-type situation, you're in harm's way. And I think soldiers sign up with the knowledge, the understanding that they're going to be potentially put in harm's way, especially at wartime, and that's a risk that they're willing to take, but it's different when you're deliberately put into a situation that costs you your life. And that's what seems to me like, from looking at this information, this case, that's what's going on here. Now, Charles, before the break, you were just beginning to share with our listeners a little bit about how your son and his colleagues, his comrades there in the SEAL Team 6 had some foreknowledge. They seemed to have some knowledge that something was amiss. You said that there were things that were being leaked out. What do you mean by that?
Well, May 3rd, Joe Biden, May 3rd, 2011, at the Ritz-Carlton in Delaware, announced that it was our elite Navy SEAL team that just killed bin Laden. And in June of 2011, Leon the Snake Panetta announced it in front of 1,500 people for the movie Zero Dark 30. And Panetta named the admiral, named where the team lives, SEAL Team 6 this, SEAL Team 6 that, and, that's why when I'm doing the radio station, because everybody knows about SEAL Team 6, there's books, there's movies, Michael's name's in the books, the movies, all that stuff, and very honorable, and you still miss them every day. Every day my heart drops, and every day I cry, and,
I can't imagine the pain that you must be going through to be in a situation. I know a lot of folks have lost loved ones, but to be in a situation when you're a parent and you outlive your child, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine the tremendous agony you must be going through, and we're terribly sorry for your loss. So when he said that things are starting to be leaked out, what he meant was the identity of who was involved in the raid, right?
Yeah.
Something that the officials should have kept secret.
Oh, yeah. Even in the book with Gates, Secretary of Defense, he comes out and he actually came out on television and said about, they put a mark on SEAL Team 6's back. That's called, they put a target on their back. I think they call that treason.
Yeah.
My son kept it close to the vest, and You know, my son would have went in there on a 10-speed if they told him to, or a horse. You know what I mean? He knew what he was getting himself into. He just didn't know people were leaking things out. You know what I mean? Somebody leaked something to Karzai, and the Taliban was sitting there waiting. And the thing that we keep going over is why did they put 30 guys plus 8 Afghans in a Chinook helicopter from 1960? Refurbished in 1985. That's why I need all your listeners.
Now, where he was put into, this was actually a known Taliban stronghold. Is that not right?
Absolutely. August 1st, 2011, Admiral Mike Miller in the newspapers said the Tangine Valley is like steroids, like Iraq on steroids.
Mm-hmm. And there had there not been already an active battle going on there for 3 days or something like that?
3 hours. The Rangers were there. The first story they came out with was the Rangers were in danger and they needed help. And the Rangers weren't in any danger. There was 47 Rangers. Then they changed it that they were after a guy named Quarry Tahir, a.k.a. Lefty Grove, who was like a high-level mark. But, not that high from what I hear now. So they were after this guy, Quarry Tahir, and he knew, Quarry Tahir knew that, they were coming for him. So he moved to a different village. You might be saying, how do I know that? I sent you a couple documents. October 2011, they had the investigation by General Jeffrey Cole. And we were down at the base and all the parents, and he was going over what happened. He did the investigation, and I raised my hand, and I asked for an after-action report, and he said, it's in the book. I asked him something else. He said, it's in the book. I asked him, what happened to the black box? And he raised his arms, and he said, a flash flood came and washed it away. In Afghanistan, there hasn't been a black flood there since Noah had an ark.
Yeah.
And so we get home, and we have this book, and in the book, there's no ink. There's no toner.
So you're telling me the pages were all blank?
All blank, a little bit of ink. You were talking about how bad the country's doing. We can't even afford ink for the parents that lose their sons and daughters for this country. So I called up and I talked to an admiral, and I said, hey, I got to pay a copy here. He said, oh, we had a lot of complaints about that. I said, all right, send me another one. He said, we can't. We burned it. But with that book, they gave us a disc.
He actually told you wait a minute. He told you he burned the book?
Yes.
What did you say to him at that point?
I said, you got to be kidding me. But they gave us a disc with that book. So you put the disc in, and there's 100 little blocks pop up. And you click it, you click it, you click it again 3 times on this one little block, and it opens up. And you can read a little bit, like 3 sentences, then it's blurry. You read a couple more sentences, blurry. And my wife, I said, we got to do something, And she figured out how to print the disc out. 1,364 pages.
Wow.
It was like a maze to figure it out, and she figured it out. And when I went to Washington 17 times, we've been down there with, like, the main copies, like, 30 pages, knocking on Congress' door. They would go, where'd you get this? I said, why don't you have this?
Yeah, because I remember the disc was actually heavily redacted as well. I guess that's what you're talking about, all the blocks, right?
Yes.
Mr. Strange, let me ask you, what is the bottom line here? Why did your son die?
That's why we're trying to get an investigation. Somebody leaked something to somebody. The Taliban knew. Was it, a payoff? Was it, it's Secretary of Defense? Hold on, my wife's here. She's got to fill you in a little bit.
Okay.
Hi, how are you guys?
Hi, good, Mrs. Strange. This is Mary Ann.
Yes, it is. Hello.
Welcome to Govern America. Appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be here and tell your story. I'm so sorry for your loss and that of your husband. I'll tell you what. I'm up against the clock here. We have the bottom of the hour break. If you want to hold over, we'll pick up with your side of the story here, okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Folks, we're visiting with Charles and Mary Ann Strange. He is the father of Michael Strange, and she is the stepmom. And we're discussing the betrayal in Afghanistan of the Navy SEAL Team 6 members. Huge slap in the face of our military. And I think it's a story that everyone needs to know.
They brought their young saint home today.
Welcome back to Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Nancy Levant is here dealing with a very difficult subject to deal with today, but a very necessary subject. And we're dealing with the Navy SEAL Team 6, the betrayal, the shooting down of their Chinook helicopter in Afghanistan. And just before the break, Mary Ann Strange, the stepmom of Michael Strange, one of the victims there, was joining us. And Mary Ann, thank you for holding on. This disc that they gave you had a lot of the information. Michael was telling us that, or I'm sorry, Charles was telling us that he was trying to get information off the book. They were trying to get information about the chain of command, who was in charge, who was ultimately responsible to give the orders to fly that thing into a known stronghold of the Taliban. And you figured out how to print out this disc and got a lot of information on that. Among the information that you had was that there were over 100 Taliban there who had traveled to the area. They had evidently been tipped off. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, they knew back on May 10th, 2011, in the paperwork it says they were questioning people that, were present during the takedown of Extortion 17, and they were talking to a couple, interviewing the fellas, and the one guy said, well, as of May 10th, 2011, it was chatter on the radio that over 100 Taliban were coming from the blank province to the Tianjin Valley to shoot down the coalition force aircraft. Now, mind you, this is just, a little over a week after taking bin Laden down.
Right.
And so they knew then.
So the question is, how did they know, who tipped them off, and why were they still sent into that area with the information being what it was?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? And it's just the sequence of events, the way everything happened. When it was the bin Laden raid, and then it was Joe Biden saying something, and then Leon Panetta, and then, Robert Gates even said that, he met the guys that did the raid. And they actually contacted him and said, look, we feel like a target's been put on our backs now. That it's being put out there who took him down. And, and then...
There's this issue also, excuse me, there's this issue also of Admiral Horowitz. Now, didn't he come out and make a statement, something to the effect... Somebody asked him, I think maybe Charles asked him why they couldn't take the Taliban out. If they knew, that this was going on, why couldn't they have taken them out with a drone or something? What did he say about winning hearts and minds?
Right. Well, let me back you up for a second. It wasn't Admiral Horowitz. It was Admiral Harward.
Oh, okay.
Harward.
Okay.
And one of the parents had said, well, why didn't you shoot at the tower when, after they shot the missiles? And he stood up. Now, we're sitting in an auditorium-style room. The seating was like auditorium-style. And he stood up and faced every one of the parents and said, well, there could have been friendlies inside, and, we want to win the hearts and minds of the Afghan people. Now, mind you, my husband has been, every fiber of his being has been ripped out by losing his son. And all the other parents there, too, and for him to say that, it's just, these guys are supposed to be educated. They're supposed to be educated and everything else. And for him to say that was just a horrible statement. Now I just want to say something because Child wants the phone back.
Okay.
I just want to. You had asked him a question about, or the woman on the phone asked, why do you think that Extortion 17 was taken down? Mm-hmm. Personally, August 6th, I said to Charlie's sister, I think this was a setup, Maggie. Nothing makes any sense, Mag. And she's like, what are you talking about? I said, I think they said there was a deal made, and they said, we'll give you Bin Laden, but we want the team that takes him out. And she was like, Mary, you sound like a lunatic, Mary. Please don't repeat that to anybody. That would never happen. And now today, Maggie knows it's a setup, but she represents everyday Americans that don't want to believe in our government. This is America. This is the greatest country in the world. And to think that somebody would do that.
It was the greatest country in the world at one time. I think they pretty well done a pretty good job at destroying it.
Well, I think it still is a great country. The people that are running it aren't.
Right.
They need to be removed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So they tipped off the Taliban. Now this situation occurred with the shootdown and the dead drop of night, and apparently I'm getting that the Taliban, the people that there were two people up on the roof, and they were waiting for the helicopter to fly in. And how did they shoot down the helicopter without having any ability to see it?
Right.
Did they have any night vision?
They have. The Taliban has everything. They have more equipment than we do. You know what I mean? All the heroin they're selling in this country, they got billions of dollars.
Well, and this I don't know if you're aware of this, Charles, but we've covered on this broadcast many times. There's actually documented evidence. It was actually reported by Global Post, which was carried by Reuters News Service. We are actually funding the Taliban. I don't know if you were aware of that or not. They say it's a dirty little secret that no one wants to talk about, but it's actually there's actually money that's changing hands. Whenever they want to build a project over there, they actually sit down with the Taliban. I guess there's a sophisticated office in Kabul. They got a process where they negotiate. Some people even call it the Taliban tax. Pay them not to blow up the projects over there. I don't know if you were aware of that or not, but that just kind of adds more to the betrayal. And maybe even this is where they're getting some of their funding, some of their equipment. What do you think about that?
My son used to say to me, Dad, you wouldn't believe what goes on in this country. And I believe now, and here guys who come home and they have our military protecting their heroin crops. Well, if we hit one of their heroin crops, we have to pay them a ridiculous amount of money. Them people are tribal. They're a tribal society. Mm-hmm. We have a national press conference from May 2012. People can Google. We had Alan West there, General McIntyre. He was just on Hannity the other night, radio and television. He was there. Admiral Ace Lyons, and a bunch of the parents. Mm-hmm. And these guys were 4-star admirals and generals. And they this is wrong here, man. Is the president a Muslim? You know what I mean? He cares more about them than he cares about our own young men and women.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be that way. You know, what it reminds me of is Vietnam all over again, because they led the troops into harm's way in Vietnam, and they turned around and tied their hands once they got them over there as well. They knew where the enemy was, and they weren't allowed to pursue. You know, so it seems like it's the same thing. They say history repeats itself. Well, it's because those who drive it cause it to. Stay with us. All right, we're back. Visiting with Charles and Marianne Strange. Their son, Michael, was one of the Navy SEAL Team 6 members that were shot down in Afghanistan. Now, Charles, I want to come back to the story here about what actually happened. Have you ever been able to get to the bottom of exactly who gave the okay for the operation, who the air planners were? Does the paperwork say anything about who was actually in charge and who was actually responsible? Because ultimately, somebody needs to be held accountable. So where does the buck stop, or does it?
Right. Now, the only names that are in the 1,364 pages is Panetta, Petraeus, General Votel. When they ask the questions, when they're over there doing the investigation, it will say Air Force Commander, we'll say TF, Task Force Guy, JSOC, JSOC 3, answering the questions. They don't give the guys that were there names. And
so this thing looks like it went all the way to the top.
Right.
The White House?
Oh, yeah. Yep,
what information do you have? I remember reading or hearing something about how the Taliban actually, after because I guess your boy wasn't in the helicopter when it actually crashed. He and a few others had actually jumped out of the helicopter and were actually on the ground trying to fight them off by themselves, right? And they were kind of left. Go ahead.
Yes, the helicopter was only 50 to 100 feet in the air, they said, over and over in the 1,300 pages. And something must have happened on the helicopter. Michael jumped out, and it looks like he had his hand was formed like he was holding a gun. When they came to the house August 6th, they told us everybody was burnt beyond recognition. All they found was 38 skulls, 38 C-spines. It was actually in the Pentagon newspaper by Corporal Lapman, L-A-P-A-N, and somebody else named Campbell. And it's documented. But here everybody didn't get cremated, and they told us, our son, when they were in Philadelphia, that Michael had to be cremated. And I called Dover a couple months later after the autopsy report, and they sent pictures, and Michael didn't have to be cremated. You could see the hair on his arms. The only thing bad about Michael was his ankle. So then we've been trying to get answers on that. We have an attorney by the name of Larry Klayman, and he's been
Is that former Judicial Watch?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I recognize the name. So you believe that he was cremated, obviously against his will. Certainly you were never consulted about that. So why do you think the reason for that would be the cremation?
I have no idea. I'm still one of my nightmares when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why I called him up. I said, "Why'd you cremate my son?" I said, and they said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "When I called Dover, they sent me the autopsy report, and they sent me a disc with pictures of Michael there. He had a gun. Looked like he had a gun in his hand fighting. And then nobody came. Nobody came to help them. They waited until daylight. Then they had 30 planes to go in. They had Blackhawks. They had 140 men. They had Pathfinders. But you didn't have that to go in to do the attack?
They had all those there, which could have intercepted, could have come to their aid, and they evidently were ordered to stand down?
You know, Charles, I cannot help but think about kind of corresponding facts, such as the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of military officers that have recently been fired, and the Benghazi situation. There's just something terribly wrong in the military. Do you have the same sense?
Absolutely. I just got an email with all the names of the top brass that's leaving. And actually, when Michael died, it was the biggest chain of command in years. I'm not actually... Anything I say is either from 1,300 pages or it's a fact. It's, you know... But when Michael died, 2 days later, Admiral Eric Olson left, McCraven moved in, General Petraeus. 10 days later, Votel moved, Miller got out, and there was a couple more, 2 or 3, I can't think right off the top of my head, all that month, August 2011. Where's the paperwork on that?
Who was the Navy SEAL Team 6's immediate command? Do you know?
I think it was a guy by the name of Van Hoosen. I'm not 100% sure. He's down at the Navy. He's out now, of course. He left too. That was one of the names I forgot. He's down the Navy SEAL Museum in Florida. I just found that out about 2 weeks ago.
And I understand that there have been threats made against certain people, certain family members that are asking questions like yourself, and have been making noise about this issue. Is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah. They actually went to some of the wives. Michael wasn't married, and told the wives to tell the parents that if they go with Mr. and Mrs. Strange, them checks could stop for your grandchildren.
Oh,
wow,
Lord!
Is this unbelievable? Extortion 17. All your listeners, please Google Extortion 17. Call your congressman, write a letter. This is, 22 of our best. This is what they told me. Not the best of the best. Our best in our country. All in a Chinook helicopter. I had Benjamin Smith, Navy SEAL Benjamin Smith, sleep over my house a couple months ago. He was a SEAL for 11 years. Never was on a Chinook helicopter. I was with Drago, 21 years, just got out in 2010. Never on a Chinook helicopter. And they weren't even, they say to me, we didn't make SEAL Team 6. I said, you were SEAL. That's unbelievable. They go, yeah, but 6 is really, you know what I mean? And,
yeah.
All of a sudden, 93 days after the so-called Bin Laden raid, you put all these guys in a Chinook helicopter into a hot landing zone, and the Taliban sitting there waiting. I mean, this is all printed, documented. And we need help.
And it makes you wonder what the truth really is regarding the Bin Laden raid. What are they trying to hide? That's the huge question, because obviously the SEALs aren't talking now, and so the big question is, what was the cover-up? What was the scam? What were they trying to cover up? And that may be something that we just don't really ever know, is it?
Right. The day before the Bin Laden papers were going to be released with the Freedom of Information Act, they got put with the Kennedy papers. Can't touch them for 60 years. I can't think. The same spot anyway.
Mr. Strange, do you feel in your heart that your son knew he was going to die?
No. No, he knew something was up. You know, he knew he didn't think he was going to get killed. You know, not by our own guys. I think all of them knew he was leaking. I don't know if it was because of Joe Biden, Leon Panetta. I think when they got in that Chinook, there was 8 Afghans, and then, before it took off, they got off, and 8 other Afghans got on the helicopter, 10 minutes prior. They don't know the names of them Afghans. Was one of them a suicide bomber? I don't know. Did a flight start on the helicopter? I don't know. Do I believe it was an RPG? No. Manpad might have hit it or something, but I don't know. That's, it's I go crazy thinking about it. And we were supposed to have a hearing down in Washington. It was on C-SPAN, and they would 10 days before it was going to happen. They wouldn't let the parents ask any questions. They let Congress ask the questions. It was just 3 weeks ago down there.
Yeah, we're almost out of the hour there, Charles. But I didn't want to let this hour go by without mentioning that Michael received the Medal of Valor, and another slap in your face. You were not even invited to the reception ceremony. Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yes, he received there's only 19 of these medals ever been given out. Michael was a cryptologist, a code breaker, and they gave him a Medal of Valor for that, and now we weren't invited. And
give out your website, sir.
MichaelStrangeFoundation.org. We bring in parents with 4 paid grief counselors. You see a video on Michael Strange Facebook. We sell T-shirts to support. We pay for everything. The 4 grief counselors, the airfare.
All right, we'll be back in hour 3. Hold it right there. We'll hold you. Just south of the Great Lakes capital city, covering all of North America via satellite, AM and FM stations all across the country, and live and archived on the World Wide Web. This is the third and final hour of Govern America. Darren Weeks and Nancy Levant here, as we are every Saturday. And it continues to be the 22nd of March, 2014, as we're finishing up here with Charles Strange, talking about his son Michael, one of the Navy SEAL Team 6 members that was shot down in Afghanistan right after the so-called bin Laden raid. And Charles, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about, I want to make sure that we had adequate time to finish up this interview properly. And I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your foundation, because I think what you're doing there is really quite wonderful, bringing these folks in, helping them deal with their grief. It's a very difficult situation, because I know, as you know, many of these soldiers, even the ones coming back alive, are never the same. They're they can't go to fireworks displays. They can't be around anything that's popping. Anything can set them off, and all of a sudden they're right back in the middle of the war zone. I have a brother-in-law who fought in Vietnam, and to this day, he wakes up in the middle of the night screaming because he's still fighting the battle in his mind, in his dreams. So these folks that are involved in this, many of them will never be the same again. And I think the post-traumatic stress, they used to call it shell-shocked. These are, I think, for those people who go to these types of situations in these war zones, are there any that come back really the same? I guess that would be my question. I think the incidences of PTSD are probably epidemic. Would you imagine so?
Yes, sir. It's I had a kid over the house, a friend of Michael's. You can't pop popcorn around this kid. He just moved from North Carolina. He told his dad, because of the mountains, reminds him of Afghanistan. His dad said, mountains ain't nothing like Afghanistan. He said, at night they are. He's moving to California. It's one a day. One a day. These young men and women are killing themselves. It's one thing to see it on television, a war movie or something like that, but to have be out on patrol and stepping on an IED, and your buddy you've been working with in the military for 3 years loses his head and his brains go all over your face. I had another kid over my house. That's what happened to him. All he kept talking about was being with his friends up in heaven, and and then for this administration to change the rules of engagement in the Afghan war twice to favor the Muslim Brotherhood is crazy. It's sickening. You seen what they did to Russia? They killed 35,000, and you know what I mean. They don't need. Obama's got to get his head checked.
Well, he's a traitor to this country. Frankly, I don't think he needs his head checked. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. He's a criminal, and he needs to be removed from office. The problem is that's not going to happen as long as the American people are conned and the American people don't realize what these things are all about. And so your foundation, what exactly is it that you do?
We bring in the moms, dads, the brothers and sisters for a weekend retreat, and with 4 paid grief counselors. There's different kinds of grieving process. You can scream about it, use the baseball bat against the tree. You can draw it. And what these therapists do is they actually have you act it out. And it's wow. It's helpful, and the most helpful thing is all the parents talk. Yeah. We had like 12 parents on the first one, and 15 volunteers, 4 therapists, and I learned this real quick. I'll tell you, I learned this real quick from vetsjourneyhome.org for any vets with PTSD. Guy by the name of Gene McMahon started it. Used to be called the Bamboo Bridge, just for Vietnam, and then in 91 they changed it to Vets Journey Home. I went down to Elkton, Maryland. Mr. McMahon called me up. I was there with a bunch of vets, and real quick, the first thing that happens to you when you're born, you get slapped, and then you're next to your mother. But as you go through life, different traumas in your life, especially in war, affect you. So we were in this big circle, and they put these chairs out. These people sat down, and they said, Mr. Strange, what's going on? I said, I got a piece of my heart missing. Da-da-da-da-da, I got a piece of my heart missing. So I laid back on these people's laps, and the rest of the group circled around. They had this music playing, and people started touching their heart and then touching my heart. Saying, here, Charlie, here's a piece of my heart. Here, Charlie, here's a piece of my heart. And I'm crying. Then they showed me a picture of Michael, and I got 1,000 pictures of Michael, and then they said, talk to him, and then they lit up some sage. It was just, so them therapists from Vets Journey Home help us out with our weekends with the parents. It's really powerful, really helpful. And the main thing is so you don't end up in the hat factory. Because a couple times, it just grips you up, man. It's just every day.
I can imagine. I mean, I really can't imagine, but every day not having that person there, and then having the betrayal on top of it.
I want to say that I just got on the Michael Strange Foundation website. Wow, your son was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful young man. So talented, very specially trained. I can't even imagine the money that was spent on him to get him to be a Navy SEAL, to get him to be a cryptologist. What a waste. What a waste of a fine young man.
Somebody told me the other day it's $1.5 million, another reporter for our local newspaper. $1.5 million to train a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I bet. No doubt.
At least, yeah.
No doubt.
You talked about an interaction that you had with the president at Dover. Did you want to tell that story real quick?
Yeah, August 2011, we went down to Dover. We're in a hangar waiting for everybody, all the bodies to come in. And out of nowhere, the president comes up to me, and he puts his hands on my shoulders. And he says, Michael changed the way America lived. And I grabbed the president by the shoulders, and I said, I don't need to know about my son. I need to know what happened. And I started shaking him like a bobblehead. And the Secret Service guys grabbed me. And I was crying, and snot's coming down my nose. And all of a sudden, he stepped up to give me a hug. And I whispered in his ear. I said, is there going to be an investigation? And I could feel the president's lips touching my ear. And he said, Mr. Strange, we're going to look into this very, very, very deep. And I never heard nothing back from him. And about 15 minutes later, Leon Panetta came up to me, and he said, Mr. Strange, I'm going to ask the same questions. And I said, UMFer, and you're the Secretary of Defense, you're going to ask the same questions. All our sons are down, went crazy. And then they took me outside for a cigarette and a bottle of water. But they know, and now, especially that was, 2 weeks after it happened, they call it PSYOPs, playing with your mind, and
what do you have?
they know.
What do you hope to come out of this? ultimately? I mean, obviously some answers, but what is your ultimate goal in seeking what you're seeking?
That this don't happen to somebody else's son or daughter. That whoever was leaking the information, gets caught up. I think we got to check everybody's bank account. I think we got to check, you know what I mean? We got to go through, the fine line here. There's, besides the helicopter and the biggest loss of life in the Iraq-Afghan war, the biggest loss in any war in the history of America, 22 special ops.
Yeah.
Like, there's something wrong here. Nobody gets held accountable.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, or Charles, thank you so much. MichaelStrangeFoundation.org. Ladies and gentlemen, check it out. MichaelStrangeFoundation.org. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us. Our prayers, our hearts, our thoughts are with you and your family.
And thank BJ.
Yeah, thank you, BJ. Always. We'll be back in a moment, folks.